everybody, welcome back to another video. Been a little while, but we're here and we're going to talk about some trophies. So last I left off, I had just talked about all the trophies I'd earned in August, and despite this being recorded sometime afterwards, today we're going to talk through everything I earned in September. September was a pretty busy month for me. I was in the middle of the True Trophies Score Challenge, which we have since been eliminated from, but we had a great time. Shoutouts to my teammates Pyre, Mr. Mo, and Matt Kuo. We all did pretty awesome, I have to say. And so a lot of the games you'll see here were kind of tied in and around that challenge. And then also this year, I kind of shifted all of my horror gaming. Usually I do all my survival horror gaming in October. I like to keep it contained to the spooky season, but this year I was going to Japan for 2 weeks in October, so I knew I wouldn't really have a lot of time. So instead I did a lot of my spooky gaming in September. And I streamed a lot of that over on my Twitch page, so some of you may have seen those streams and know some of what I played. But then there was other stuff I played offline as well, and it was just a good, scare-tember is kind of the theme that we had going on. So we're going to go through each and every one of the games that I played and or platinumed in September 2025 and give you a breakdown of what the lists were like, what I felt about the games, whether or not I played through the whole thing or just cleaned up some trophies. So if you're a trophy hunter, this will be interesting to you, of course. If you're not a trophy hunter, I think you'll still get something out of it because we're just talking about games that we enjoy playing, right? It's not a binary here. We enjoy some and we enjoy hunting at the same time. So our first game is going to be Gravity Ghost. This was a game that I went back and cleaned up that I had played previously. If you've never played Gravity Ghost, it's an indie that's like, I guess gravity focused. It's really orbit focused. So you play as this woman who's kind of like floating in these individual levels, orbiting around planets that all have their own individual gravity and things like that, all in a 2D plane. But it's about like momentum and kind of slingshotting yourself around a planet to reach higher destinations, and eventually you get upgrades and power-ups that let you kind of manipulate your momentum and your physics a little bit. And it's just you kind of like going through this narrative about really her life at the same time as solving these physics-based momentum puzzles. So I'd played this in the past. I enjoyed it. This is not the type of game that, to me, like, floors me, but it was like a really pleasant 3 to 4 hours, fun, solid puzzle game. Definitely one that I would recommend to people if they're in the mood for something just kind of chill. Or if they're in the mood for a game with an incredible soundtrack, because the OST on this thing is really good. Way underrated. But I went back to this. You can see I originally played it in 2022. I went back in 2025 to clean up the last few trophies I didn't have. And these are all the types of trophies that you probably wouldn't get on your first playthrough. Terraforming 100 planets, this is like a mechanic in the game where you can change elemental properties of planets. So you can walk around it and make it into like an ice planet or a fire planet or like a more Earth-like planet, stuff like that. And those have different properties that affect how you play the game. You don't naturally do this over the course of the game, but it's pretty easy to go clean up after the fact. Floating for 10 minutes without touching the ground, that's easy if you're trying for it, but why would you be trying for it in a normal playthrough? Obviously, like I said, it's all momentum, gravity, physics-based, so you can set up an orbit around a planet or a number of planets where it's a stable orbit and you'll basically never touch the ground, right? And so you just have to find a situation where you can create that and you'll get this trophy. And then carrying all the animal spirits and planet pieces at once. These are like, they're not really collectibles. They're more like, think of them almost like keys in a Zelda game. So as you're playing through, it's level to level to level on like a map. And as you're playing through a level, in one level you might find an animal spirit or you might find a planet piece. And then that will follow you and you need to deliver it to the body of like the skeleton of the animal or to like a central hub in the case of the planet pieces. So it's like you're delivering them back. They basically unlock further levels or abilities, things like that. But you can technically play where you avoid all the levels where you would hand in, like cash in those spirits so that they're all following you all at once in one big blob. Not something that people are going to really ever do on their natural playthrough because it's very unintuitive. It's the type of thing where it's like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. But all the same, you can do it and you get a couple of trophies for that. And then there's a speedrun trophy. Are you a wizard? This is a pretty tight speed run, but it's a pretty fun one because it's all momentum based. You know, when you get good at those levels, you can kind of whip around, foo, 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 and feel really cool. I mean, a lot of these levels can be finished in like 3 seconds if you know kind of where to jump, how, the momentum, all that stuff. It's like Portal in that way, where your 10th time through a stage looks very different and takes 1/100th of the time of your first playthrough of a stage. So 50 minutes is pretty tight though, because there are unskippable cutscenes and like sections where, like, you know, bosses are kind of talking to you. So of the 50 minutes, probably like 15 of those minutes or so, it's taken up by like things you have no agency over, no control, no ability to speed up. And so you really have 35 minutes to get through the whole game. So what I ended up doing is, the game is split up into like 8 different worlds, kind of constellations is how they're broken up. I ended up, after every constellation, I would just save the game, upload that save to the PlayStation Plus cloud, and then I would start the next one and do that. I never really needed to download my save. I might have once or twice. It's been a while, so I don't remember. But it was more that the comfort of doing that, the peace of mind I got knowing that I could retry if I needed to, made it so that I was able to get the speed run with some confidence. And you can tell it's the rarest trophy by far. You know, it's 5% relative to some of these other more common ones. So, yeah, fun game. Definitely recommend. No platinum, but always good to get a nice 100% on the account. And it has kind of a Day of the Dead theme. So this is one that I played as like a transition into my spooky season, which felt really natural. Next game is Pyre. So I talked a lot about Pyre in a previous video. I don't know that I need to relay all of that. I will say I really loved Pyre. I think that Pyre is like maybe my second favorite Supergiant game after Hades. I think it's like a really standout game. Even a bit underrated, I would say, relative to the rest of their catalog. I feel like this is probably on the bottom of most folks' lists. But I think in terms of a lot of what Supergiant does best, you know, narrative, world building, like genuine, earnest, relatable characters that you get invested in. This is both some of the best they've ever done, and then also like really strongly and very clearly setting up the foundation for Hades. Plus, all the art in this game is gorgeous. I love the sports like mechanics of it all. And I just think that it's really well done. The way the narrative branches based on your decision in some pretty wild ways. Maybe not branch, but adjusts to your decisions. It's just a phenomenal game. So I had done most of this in August, but because this game is kind of a sports game, right? It's almost like a 3-on-3 NBA Jam kind of deal. There is PvP. Like you can play against CPUs or you can play against other human opponents. And so I had saved all of those. I had not done all of those. There's just a bunch of different like setups and scenarios you need to do. You need to like create specific teams and win against other specific teams. You need to win, you know, really handily. You need to win in a really close match, you know, have with your Pyre having less than 10 health. It's just a lot of specific things that you have to set up in order to achieve that trophy, but they're not that hard to do. And it's fun to experiment with some of the more mechanical aspects of the game. Especially because you can play as characters in the PvP mode that you can't play as during the course of the narrative, right? Like you can play as a lot of the opponent teams and some of the other characters in the game. So it's just really an interesting blend, an interesting mix of how all of the mechanics come together and just how the game plays. So it's really fun to go back and get this. And I'm happy to have this now. This now means that I have every Supergiant Platinum. Maybe not every version. There might be a PS4 and PS5 version of Hades that you can get, but I have Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and Hades now. So that feels pretty dang good. All right. Next game here. Kind of a random indie. This is a game called De-Exit Eternal Matters. And as you can see on the screen, this is a pretty rare platinum. 3.36% is an ultra rare. That was a large part of my motivation to play this game because it gave really great points for the True Trophy Score Challenge. Now, I wouldn't have played it if the game itself didn't appeal to me a little bit, and in watching some footage and screenshots of this game, I was like, okay, this game seems cool. It had kind of like a little bit of a Legend of Zelda, or more of like a narrative platformer, something like Eco or Rhyme, something like that. So I thought, all right, that could be cool. I'll check it out. And unfortunately, the game was just not really for me. It was not my favorite game that I've ever played. It had a lot going for it, and you could tell there's a lot that went into making the game, and it's in many ways has like solid production value. It's like a full, involved, competent game. It's just the actual movement of the character I found to be sluggish and kind of frustrating. I found a lot of the environments to feel a little uninspired. Puzzles sometimes were very clunky and they weren't really signposted that well. There's just a lot of friction playing through the game. And that wasn't helped at all by the fact that because I was playing this for that challenge, I did want to make sure I got the trophies. And a large part of why this platinum is so rare is because this game is just absolutely riddled with missable trophies. There's no chapter select, so you have to get all the collectibles in one playthrough. And then all throughout the game, there's all sorts of little situations where there's only one spot you can get a trophy. If you miss it, it's gone forever. So you do have to be attached to a guide at the hip. Thankfully, there is a really great trophy guide by Velvet Bee, and we were able to follow that to get everything. And it kind of breaks it down by chapter on what you need to do and where. But yeah, it's not a very fun game. At least I didn't think it was a particularly fun game. It's not a bad game, but if you are in the mood for a lot of ultra rare trophies and an interesting game that not a lot of people have checked out, totally worth checking out, because this will definitely pad up your list a little bit. I mean, you can see not a lot of people have played this, and there's only 18 Platinum Achievers, so a relatively exclusive club on this one. But we got through it, and even though it took me a while, technically I got the Platinum in October, because I saved the Platinum for that challenge for when I needed it, but I did 99% of the work at the beginning of September here. So you can just tell it's all miscellaneous stuff. Use the helmet inside the mine. If you walk one room too far in the mine, you'll miss that. Interact with the fox. It shows up at exactly one point in one chapter. If you walk past it, point of no return, can't go back. So there's a lot of collectibles and stuff you have to be keeping an eye on. Next platinum I earned was Hot Shots Golf. Now, I think I played this in August, so you heard me talk about it there. But I love the Hot Shots series, and especially after watching my buddy Ari Louie on YouTube put out his Hot Shots Golf retrospective. I was really back in the mood for this game, this series really. And so I went back and I played it. And this was just me kind of cleaning up where I had left off. So I had stopped. I needed to unlock a couple more characters, a couple more courses, and then, of course, the big ones are getting a hole-in-one and getting an albatross, which both of these were relatively tough, but there are somewhat consistent setups to get each of them. You just dig through the forum posts, look on YouTube videos, you'll find setups where you can get each of these. Honestly, the biggest thing you need to do these most easily is after you unlock this last course, there's actually one more course that there's no trophy for, so play until you unlock that. Then in practice mode, you can get these pretty easy. So, happy to have that plat. Love this series. Looking forward to 2. Alright, next game, and getting into the spooky season, we have a VR title, Paranormal Activity: The Lost Soul. So this is a game based, obviously, on the Paranormal Activity series of movies, of which I've never seen any of them, but this was a VR game I played a while back in 2018. Yeah, 2018 I played this one, and then I went back here in 2025 to clean it up. The game itself is, I think, pretty typical for VR horror. You explore a house, you're walking around the house, some spooky stuff happens, you're trying to just find keys that will unlock different rooms of the house. You go all throughout the first floor, second floor, basement, attic, all that stuff. You're trying to find these different objects for a ritual that you're going to be performing at the end of the game, and just trying not to get scared in the process. I would say pretty PSVR 1-ish controls, which is to say a little on the clunky side. But they have since added 2D support, non-VR support if you don't want to play in VR. Unfortunately, the VR support is better than the non-VR support in that the 2D controls are even harder to control. It's you're having to use every button on the controller to like manipulate your hands and rotate them. It was very clearly like a one-to-one mapping of motion controls into like analog button controls, which just don't really work. So I'd recommend that you play this in VR actually. But in order to see this one through, I had played it, but I had to do basically a collectible hunt and then a couple of playthroughs. So, you know, finding all the various collectibles, the letters, the batteries. Then there are a couple more specific trophies. There's an alternate ending you can get for finding like 5 hidden items and then doing something special at the tail end of the game. Which can be a little bit tricky because you only have one shot to do this really. And if you don't get it, you might have to replay a good chunk of the game. Complete the game without dying. That will come naturally alongside hardcore mode because you can't save in hardcore mode. So you basically have to do a one-shot straight playthrough of the entire game without dying. It's not a very long game. Like if you know where to go, probably like 45 minutes. Your natural first playthrough will probably take you like 2 to 3 hours. So it's only like a 45-minute game, but it is a little stressful because the very end of the game, there's, like I said, you're performing a ritual, and there's these objects that are zipping around in front of you. You need these 5 objects, and you need to place them on like a pentagram in a certain order. And it'll show you what one you need, and then you need to grab that one out of the air and set it down, and if you don't do it fast enough, you die. But because the motion controls are kind of janky, and it's like weird to judge distance on how far an object away is going to be and grab the right object, because sometimes you'll grab the wrong one. Sometimes this like little tiny photograph or whatever will be zipping by you and you will be trying to grab it and you can't, and then you run out of time. So, you know, just make sure that you're feeling confident when you get to that part. Otherwise you might have to replay an entire 45-minute section just to have one more shot at that trophy. Thankfully it wasn't too bad to get both of those together, and then I unlocked the Tortured Soul, all trophies. Interesting little VR game. You know, not amazing by any stretch. Maybe not even that good, but I think most people can get some joy out of like a couple hours of VR horror. So, kind of wins by default. Next up, we have a 2025 game, one that I really enjoyed, and that is The Midnight Walk. So, this came out this year, and this is like a claymation, stop-motion puzzle platformer. So, you know, it's a type of game where you're kind of going along, solving puzzles, going from location to location, but in reality you're there for the vibes. You're soaking in the world, this kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas-esque, like creepy with a little bit of cute mixed in space that they've crafted. And again, so much care and artistry went into each of the individual characters that it really ends up feeling like a special world that you're exploring. Now, I will say, this game came out simultaneously. They didn't really market it as PlayStation VR 2, but it has both a 2D and a VR release. You can play the game in either form. You can swap back and forth at any point. I played my first session of this game in 2D, not in VR. And I was like, okay, this game's fun. This game is good. It didn't like really get its hooks into me, but I was like, you know, this is fun for a couple hours. But learning that it was going to be like an 8-hour game, I was like, that's kind of a lot. But then the next session, I decided to try the VR, and that was like transformative to my appreciation for this game. This game absolutely sings in VR. The art style is so strong, and being able to get up close and personal with all of these like clay model figures gives them like way more of a punch in the scary moments, but it just gives you like a much stronger appreciation for the world that they've built. It's the type of game where like the art really elevates it, and the VR really elevates the art. So if you were going to play this game, I absolutely recommend that you play the VR2 version, because it is way better, in my opinion, than the standard 2D version in this particular case. I really enjoyed it. So, to get through this one, honestly, this is a very easy platinum. You just play through the game. There's some collectibles. I think I got all but like 2 or 3 of the collectibles my first playthrough. You can chapter select back to any chapter to get the ones you missed. There's a couple endings, but it's based really just on like a choice at the end of the game, so it's easy to get both. And then there's like a couple miscellaneous trophies, like the last one I got here was staying in the house for 10 minutes. That's kind of like your home base, so just chilling there for 10 minutes and then you get the platinum. So very easy platinum. I mean, as you can tell, 35% rarity, not uncommon at all. But a fun game and a fun platinum to go for. Like a solid 8 to 10 hour experience to do everything. Definitely recommend it. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see how, my Game of the Year list shakes out at the end of the year. But this game has a chance to be on there, I will say. The VR version has a chance to be on there. VR is really what sold me on it. All right, then we got more cleanup that I was doing. This time I went back to Dredge. So Dredge, this is the spooky boat game. I think most people have probably played Dredge at this point. It had a bit of a moment as an indie darling there when it first came out. Kind of popped off on Twitch and stuff like that. So most folks have played this. They're aware of the story of, a fisherman who's kind of trying to maintain his sanity in this otherworldly, eerie oceanside village. But there is some DLC that released for this game. There's 2 packs, actually. The Pale Reach, which I did back in 2023, and then the Iron Rig. And I went back and did the Iron Rig this time. The Iron Rig is interesting because the Pale Reach was more like we made a new area for the game. The Iron Rig was more like they incorporated more into the entire world of the game. So it had you re-exploring old areas, but finding new fish, new aberrations, and like learning a little more about a different kind of story that blended, I felt like, very cohesively with the themes of the game. It has a little bit of that cosmic horror to it. It has a little bit of like an anti-capitalist bent to it. It was, I think, really well done. This is my preferred DLC pack of the 2, probably. And it was not too bad to go through, It was like a couple hours. Well, maybe this says more than a couple hours, but I didn't play it the whole way straight through. So probably 3 to 4 hours to do everything on that. And it was fun to revisit Dredge. That's a solid game. Probably no more DLC coming out for this one, I'd imagine. So this is probably going to be the permanent 100% on Dredge. All right, next up we have another pretty unknown horror game. This is a game called Narcosis. This is an underwater horror game. So you play as a man who's kind of recounting the story of a disaster that occurred in a science laboratory on the ocean floor or deep underwater. And so there's a science team that was kind of doing this cutting edge work below the ocean, and then spooky things started to happen. And so it's you kind of recalling that and kind of grappling with your, like, almost like his interpretation of the events. It's interesting. There's a little bit of like messing with the player going on here, lightly. So it's an interesting game, and it has a pretty interesting conclusion too. I think the story wraps up in a neat way. I mean, it's a little twisty, but it was fun. Unfortunately, the actual game is pretty sluggish to control. Now, you are underwater, and you're in like a big diving suit, right? So you have thrusters to help you move forward, but it's just the actual like minute-to-minute trudging underwater is at a very slow pace, and that is made worse by the fact that you have limited oxygen. All throughout the world, there is oxygen canisters you can find, but if you take a couple wrong turns, you go the wrong way, and don't know how to get back, you might basically screw yourself by wandering too far in the wrong direction, running out of oxygen, dying, and having to restart. So that can be a little frustrating. It's a little bit of like juddery in terms of your progress, but still, points for a unique aesthetic and a unique environment to set a horror game. Not a lot of underwater horror games, which is cool. As for the trophy side of things, so again, I had played this game back in 2021. I'd only gotten a couple trophies, but I had to do, these have a lot of like cryptic trophy things. So there's a lot of miscellaneous trophies or combat related trophies. You can kind of like slash with a knife when fish dive at you. But the 2 main trophies that I had to work on were retrieve the ID cards from each member of the Oceanova crew and 1 personal effect. So these are just 2 collectible trophies spread all throughout the game. And there's chapter select, but it's glitched. The collectible tracking in the game is glitched. And so you can't use chapter select to clean it up. So that means that the only way that people found to earn these trophies is to get all of the collectibles in a one-shot playthrough of the game. Never save and close the game. Never go back to the PlayStation dashboard. Nothing. You have to just one-shot the whole game, and the collectibles tracker won't bug if you do that. So even knowing what to do, it's like a 3-hour game, so I had to find the time, which is not easy, all right? It's not easy to find 3 unbroken hours as a dad of a 2-year-old. But we found 3 hours and played through the entire game, and I was sweating bullets the whole time because if I missed even one of these collectibles, and again, the game is riddled with points of no return, if I missed even one, my entire playthrough would have been for naught. So I was double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking, so paranoid that I missed stuff, so nervous, but ultimately I did get both of them, as you can see. I didn't have to play it more than one time. Probably wouldn't have played it more than the one time, and we're able to lock that one down. Another 100%, not a platinum, but probably a relatively uncommon 100% if I was to venture a guess. Definitely like a 6 out of 10 kind of game, but neat for horror fans. Next up here we have Synapse. Synapse is a VR roguelike first-person shooter. A lot of people have probably seen this because it was in some PlayStation Directs and stuff like that. Very stylish, very striking game at first glance because the entire world is monochromatic. It's all black and white, other than key objects and your like psycho powers or psychokinetic powers, I guess, kind of like Control. So imagine like if Control was a roguelike first-person shooter. You're taking cover, you're shooting enemies, trying to get for headshots, but then with your other hand, you can like lift boxes and throw them into enemies or grab grenades out of the air and throw them back. You get a variety of psychic powers. And as you play through the game, you will have to upgrade your weapons and upgrade your psychic powers and eventually make it all the way through. But it's a roguelike, so you'll die. You'll go back to the start, you get some permanent upgrades, and try again. Thankfully, it's a pretty generous one. I think it was like my 3rd or 4th run that I beat the game. And it didn't take more than another couple hours of playing it to get the platinum. It's a pretty quick platinum, sub 10 hours for sure. But what's interesting about the platinum in this game is that every trophy is completing a revelation. And revelations are basically like soft challenges within the game that unlock permanent upgrade points for you. So the nail that sticks out, I don't know, that's probably based on the icon. It's probably like kill 10 enemies by throwing a box at them. And then when you do that, after your run, you can turn that in for basically experience, and then you can use that on a permanent upgrade tree to give yourself more powers or more health or start with more weapons or whatever it might be. And so the entire trophy list is just you having to basically earn the majority of those challenges, which made it nice because you didn't have to really be referencing the trophy list. You were just kind of going for the in-game already desirable goals, like the goalposts of the game had set out for you. So not too hard. You can, when you finish this game, you get the story keeps going and you can get like difficulty modifiers. You don't need to do much of that for the actual platinum. You'll just need to at least clear it once, and then you'll probably have to do several more runs where you're grinding like a couple of the longer revelations. Things like spending X amount of currency or killing 3,000 of a particular type of enemy, something like that. So not too bad at all. Was able to get it knocked out in a couple of different sessions. Looks like 2 or 3 sessions, right? One big one on the 15th, then I came back to it on the 29th and played a bunch. And then cleaned it up at the next day on the 30th. So barely at the end of September I was able to get that. But really fun. If you're going to go for some VR platinums, this game is totally worth checking out. Next one here we have Sea of Stars. This is the turn-based RPG from Sabotage Studios. Came out several years ago to pretty strong acclaim, calling back to classics like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasies 3 and 2 and stuff like that. I had done this platinum already in the past, but there was some DLC. There was a set of trophies that they introduced called Dawn of Equinox. This was more like quality of life features that they added to the main game, and co-op. So they did like a revamp of this game sometime in 2024, I think it was, where they basically patched some of the bigger complaints that people had with the battle system to make it less monotonous, and they added co-op play, so you can play cooperative up to 3 players, and a couple other things. And so these are basically trophies for doing all of those things, doing the new mechanics, high-fiving in co-op, fishing with the new characters that you can control, stuff like that. These are pretty uncommon trophies, mostly because you need to have multiple controllers to be able to do some of these. Especially doing a timed block with 3 players, you need to have 3 controllers to do that, which most people won't. You can do 2 controllers and the PlayStation Remote Play app, but thankfully I have 3 controllers, so I was able to get that one done. But the real star of the show was Throes of the Watchmaker. This is the DLC that they added for Sea of Stars. And I went back and played through this campaign, and I loved it. It was so well done. It kind of did everything that I want a DLC to do. It had its own kind of experience system, and they added new classes for the characters. So you're getting new abilities, new experience, new progression that makes sense logically over the course of this like 7 to 8 hour DLC. A new mini story that ties in to the main story, but is its own kind of individual thing. And then it expanded on some of my favorite parts of the original game, namely Wheels. If anybody played Wheels, which is like the side game, almost like Warhammer kind of deal, tower defense Warhammer type game, they expand on that a little bit in here too in ways that are really fun, but I don't want to spoil for people. So really great DLC pack. If you like Sea of Stars, this is free, so please go back and check it out. I know a lot of people are not DLC heads and they don't like revisiting games for DLC, but I think this DLC is super worth it if you're a fan of the base game. Really, really fun. All right, next game. This is Ape Escape Academy. This is a PSP minigame collection. This game is not particularly good, not particularly fun. I did this for 2 reasons. One is it was a relatively fast platinum that I could do for the True Trophy score competition. And 2, I do have this kind of like loose, soft, eventual goal of doing all the platinums on all of the PlayStation Classics in the PlayStation Premium, Classics catalog. So this is one of them. This is just like a 3 to 4 hour minigame collection. You just play through. You basically have to unlock every minigame, achieve certain scores in certain minigames. Not hard. It's the type of game that you can play with one eye while you're watching Netflix with the other eye. Very straightforward. Plays nothing like the actual Ape Escape games, which I love, so you can't even really compare it to that very much. It is a perfectly serviceable game, but it's not one that's going to shake you to your core. Next game is I played a little more Trials of Mana. Something about Trials of Mana, this is a game that I just revisit every so often. I've never gone for the platinum, but I always pop a couple trophies here and there. Fun action RPG. I just want to touch on this one because you can see I played the game in 2020, then I went back in June of 2025, and then now here I went back in September 2025. And really I did this because there was, during that True Trophy Score Challenge, there was the objective for one of the weeks was get X number of trophies in RPGs or action RPGs, and this is a game that was on my list that I wanted to go clean up that had that tag. So I went back and I basically earned all of the trophies that I could on my current playthrough. So to get the platinum in this game, you have to do 3 different playthroughs. And I kind of set it up to the point where everything that I could possibly do on a first playthrough is done, including a bunch of the post-game stuff. So now I just need to play through as the other characters and do a bunch of stuff that is only really going to be possible on a second playthrough and or third playthrough. So that feels pretty good. And yeah, this is just a fun game. So nice to earn a couple more trophies in that. Another quick one here, you can see that there was a week where I was really trying to earn some points for my team in the True Trophy score competition, but Super Stardust Portable. I actually am very nostalgic for Super Stardust on PlayStation 3. I played that at my buddy's house right when it came out. We loved that game. He's great at it. I'm okay at it. But I'd never played the portable version, so I played this, and it was very nostalgic to go back and revisit this game. It's like a top-down twin-stick shooter, very... It's just like score chasey kind of game. Obviously, this is Housemarque, which is a developer I love. Returnal's one of my faves. And so it was nice to go back and visit their early work. And it was really pleasant. Quick, easy platinum. I think this is pretty well known for being like one of the quickest platinums on the Classics collection. And that's mostly because you can do the rewind feature. So there's trophies that are relatively hard in the base game, like, getting 15 bombs, getting a 10 times multiplier. But none of those are that hard in this version, because anytime you make a mistake or die, you zip back by 10 seconds and start over. So pretty fun game. Cool to revisit that one. Then we have another horror game that I went back and cleaned up. I was on a VR horror cleanup like tear, mostly thanks to my buddy Matt Kuo, who kept assigning me these games off of my backlog, which is a challenge I've talked about many times on the channel. But the Inpatient is a VR horror game that is a prequel to the Until Dawn game. So this is a game developed by Supermassive, put out by Supermassive, and it is a Supermassive game in all the senses that you would think, right? Like there's decisions, characters can live or die, you know, things can go right or wrong. And so I went back and I replayed this one for the sake of getting as many of the trophies as I could. It required multiple playthroughs because you need to do kind of like, I don't want to spoil the details of the game, but you basically need to do a playthrough where things go very well and a playthrough where things do not go very well. Thankfully, I actually had set up my original playthrough in such a way where I was able to load my blind playthrough save and do like one tiny decision differently and earn the trophies, earn some specific trophies, which cut out an entire playthrough out of my my need to replay. So I was able to do basically 1.5 playthroughs where I played up to a point, made a save, finished it under certain criteria, then reloaded that save and finished it under other criteria and got all the trophies. But this game's a little janky, and it actually starts kind of slow, but it is fun and it is scary at points. So it's nowhere near as good as Until Dawn, and certainly not as good as The Quarry, which I love. But it's a fun little oddity on the VR, and you know it's always nice to get like a sub 10% platinum on a game from a series that people really know. Then we're going to close it out with yet another VR horror game, because I was on a VR tear. This one is called Happy Funland. I had never heard of this game. I found it very cheap at GameStop and decided to take a chance on it. And it was interesting. I streamed a lot of this game. I basically streamed the first half of it on Twitch. I couldn't stream the entire game because long sessions of this game gave me motion sickness, but short bursts it was fine, so I cleaned it up off stream. But in this game, you basically are exploring an abandoned Disney World. Like it's this old abandoned amusement park set out in the Florida Bayou, and you go out there to investigate something. You actually are going out there to like record, you know, like those YouTube videos that people like walk through abandoned malls and stuff. You're basically like boots on the ground recording like a walkthrough of the abandoned amusement park for YouTube. But obviously stuff happens, things get spooky. It's not actually scary. It's like, it's got some Five Nights at Freddy's energy to it, but it still was like neat and interesting. But there are parts of this game that you need VR legs for, because I mean, I will say it's an amusement park. You will go on amusement park rides, roller coasters, Ferris wheels, etc. And if your stomach is not ironclad, you are going to get motion sickness on some of those. So just, you know, prepare yourself, adjust accordingly, play in small doses, and you'll be okay. Actually playing through, there was just a ton of miscellaneous trophies. This game has 40 trophies, but no platinum. Ton of miscellaneous trophies for doing various things. Half of the game will, like, give you trophies for doing any tiny little objective. As you're playing through, it's just like popcorn. Like, ding, 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 you're getting trophies all the time. It is funny here, if you look, the trophies, that this is sorted by the date that I earned them, right? So they know the order that events are going to happen, story and otherwise. So the trophy icons spell out Happy Funland, which I thought was pretty neat. But then you're just playing through the game, doing some miscellaneous stuff, of which there's chapter select if you need it, and some non-miscellaneous stuff, and then there's 80 collectibles all throughout the game. So you just are keeping an eye out for the collectibles. Most of them are like in plain sight, not hard to find. And you can go clean them up afterwards if you need to, and then you'll be able to get all the trophies. So yeah, the rarest one is just completing the game and getting all the collectibles. Well, getting all the collectibles is far and away the rarest one, but it's really not that bad. So this was a neat game to stream and just an interesting little oddity. See, that makes what, like 4 VR games that I played in September, all horror games. So feels pretty good. Whew, and that is my September in gaming. I did play a couple other things that I didn't talk about here because I feel like you've heard about them. I played Silent Hill F. I started that. I have not finished that, and I didn't want to spoil any of the trophies for people, but I'm 3 or 4 hours into Silent Hill F, and so far I'm really enjoying my time. I got kind of distracted. You know, I stopped playing it before my trip to Japan, and then I haven't picked it back up since we've been back, but I may pick it back up here soon. I hope to. But it is getting to be Game of the Year season, so I also want to check out some new stuff. So I played that, and I did finish Silksong. I was able to beat Silksong. Now, I didn't get the platinum. I have done none of the post-credits anything. There's a lot of Silksong to play after you quote-unquote beat it. I've done none of that. But I will probably return to that at some point, too. We will see. So that was my September. Thank you all for sticking around after a bit of an absence here. And apologies that there's no questions in this video, but there were so many games that I didn't have time to also edit in the questions. But we will continue with the questions in the October video and videos moving forward. So please, as always, feel free to ask me any questions you have down in the comments. It can be about trophy hunting, my game tastes, my game collection, my life, anything you want to ask that I'm down to answer. Feel free to ask. You can ask multiple questions. You know, whatever you put in, I put into a big doc, and we answer them over time. So, yeah, all that to say, thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one, and peace.